Hey, it's Drybear. The First Descendant received a major update today with a bunch of new changes, including being able to increase the power of and implant our reactors. So we'll start with the reactor changes because it's the biggest system going into this patch and will open up a lot for your character. When you first load into the game, you will be able to go over to the Descendant trainer and get access to a subquest that will unlock reactor implanting for you. To access the system, you just come to the normal workbench that you would normally go to, and now there's a new option here that is implant reactor. The downside with this is that it's incredibly expensive. Requiring 2,000 ion accelerators and 200 precise ion accelerators. Not only does this have a high cost in the materials to get these items, but also has a high gold cost as well. This is about 6 million gold worth of materials plus crafting that you'll have to use every time you implant. Now, when I first saw this, I thought this was extremely expensive, and it really is, and I fear most for new players or players that are just getting into the system that want to make a good reactor for themselves, but realistically, you are getting a very end-game item that you can use for your character, highly optimized, and you don't have to do it crazy amounts. I mean, you're still going to need to do it for every build, but having this option is super nice, and realistically, you can get about 6 million gold per hour at the best gold farming spot, so I would rather farm gold for an hour, honestly, than farm reactors for an hour to get random drops that may not even happen. So there's definitely some realism to that on there, but I would say that the cost of this is exceptionally high compared to most other things in the game. Now, what's cool about this system is you can take a mount optimization condition, which is the mounted weapon, on a different reactor and implant it onto another reactor. And so you can have up to 3 different conditions on a reactor. I think optimally you'd want to have all 3 of your weapon loadout. Like for your loadout, the 3 weapons you use, you'd want to have all 3 on there so that it doesn't matter which one you switch to, you still have your reactor activated, but only one of these can be active at a time. So this is like an either or system. All 3 weapons are on here. As long as you have one of those weapons in your hand, it will give you the reactor bonus. It's not like it's scaling up the reactor bonus. It stays the same. It just means that it's easier to meet that bonus in order to activate the passive for the reactor to give you that skill power effect. Now, a couple things to make note of here. You can't change the base drop. So the base drop weapon does sort of matter. I would say that the thing you're looking for on reactor drops now primarily is good stats. You're kind of looking for the gold double stat roll to make the reactor the best that it can be, but you can't change the base level weapon as far as we know. I haven't been able to get to 2 unlocks here, so maybe it allows you to circle back, but I think you can't change the baseline drop. And now realistically, you probably don't need all 3 of your weapons on here to get the passive here, as we've been getting by with just 1 weapon, so having 2 that you can choose right off the bat is probably plenty for most builds. And we know that there are some abilities that persist after swapping weapon. So if you, like, for example, you activate Bunny's 3 with the reactor active, and then you switch to a different weapon, it will still maintain that snapshot. So there are some abilities that can get around this, but I think having 2 choosable weapon slots for this is really great. And you have the double roll for the gold, or for, like, you get your stats on that, which means that you get a very good reactor with a reasonable time frame rather than just wondering and hoping and waiting for a random reactor to drop that may never drop, as you can farm weeks at a time and never get the reactor you're looking for. They've also updated the Defend Albion resource special operations. So all of these have been pretty good. Most people have been doing like block hyper mining in several locations, and for some specific farms, people have been doing neutralized void experiment, but for the most part, except for like the opening week of the launch, we haven't really been touching Defend Albion resource because they're incredibly long and difficult to complete. Most of these would be like, especially Echo Swamp and Kingston, would be upwards of an hour to complete and generally just not worth it. So what they've done in this patch is they've lowered the number of waves from 21 down to 10. So the wave count is equal to the reward count. So you have up to 10 here. So it's way faster to complete. It should be much, much easier to get done. They also changed it so some of these materials have a higher drop rate on the check marks. So when you're going through and looking to see where these rewards are, these should be a higher drop rate. They added in the buff modules. So if you go into these block hyper minings and you walk around, you will be able to get buffs that drop, like you don't consume ammo for 30 seconds, or you have extra defense, things like that. Those same buff consumables will now drop in the defense missions as well, which makes it a little bit easier to farm and get through. They drastically increased the amount of monsters spawning, so it's more of a swarm-like feel, as well as they added a whole bunch of weapon proficiency XP from these reward checkpoints. So what they wanted to do, and they had stated this before, is they wanted to make sure that this was like the premier place to level weapons while you stand in place and just fight hordes of monsters. So hopefully this accomplishes exactly what they're looking for, but it's a nice change for these that previously were very long and kind of annoying to do. The next change is a auto socket feature. So let's walk through what this is. And this one is, it felt kind of weird at first, but when I think about it, it makes sense and you actually don't need it anymore. So if you look at the menu on the screen here, you'll notice that the socket button is gone. We don't have a button anymore for changing what sockets are equipped on a certain slot. So you'll notice that you'll have the available sockets here from your catalyzing process. If you have the option to do a blank socket, you'll have this like blank slot, and then the sockets of the different sockets you have applied to your weapon or character are all going to be listed here. You cannot force a socket to be different anymore. It's all just there. They've made it an automated process now where you don't have to actually set it yourself. It will always just try to make the best choice for you, which again is why it felt kind of weird for me at first, is like, okay, well, I want to change these. But you think about it, you don't really want to ever force the wrong socket type on something to increase the capacity cost, and you don't really want to ever use empty if you have the option to make it cheaper. So the way this works now is that your sockets are just here, they exist, your socket types are there, they exist, you can't interact with them. You'll still be able to catalyze and add these here to increase the availability. And then when you put a socket into, or a module into a socket, so let's take this malachite and put it on the root tile, you'll notice that because the root tile can't change, it goes to red because this is a forced option. This is like the one that comes with the Greg's Reverse Fate, so I can't change it. But if I go to one that has an option for an empty slot and I put like a malachite on an almandine, you'll notice that it doesn't do the almandine, it takes the empty slot. And that's because that is the best option for that module in that socket. Then if we take this malachite and we put it on an option that has either empty or malachite, you'll notice that it automatically activates the malachite socket and lowers the cost. And when you're going down and you're equipping these by clicking on them or using your controller, it'll automatically put them in the best socket possible. So you can see how it's going around selecting all the best ones, and it's automatically activating the socket bonus to be able to give you the bonus that you need. And if we do like some almandines here, if we go down and we do like a Xantic, it puts it in the right spot and automatically activates the socket for you, which lowers the cost for that as well. So it's all done for you. They have a new option here where you can press Y on PC to see what other options you have for the sockets in that sockets slot to be able to see what's available, but it's all automated. You don't have to set it manually anymore. It just does it for you if it can. If there's no other option to get done with, then it'll just put it in there and it'll cost more, but you know, it is what it is. You'll be able to put them in there and it's all automatic, which again, for me, felt kind of weird at first, but when you think about it, you don't really need the option, because why would you ever hurt yourself by making it worse if you have the option to make it better? The Descendant daily task system is back, and this one will run until November 20th, so the next 21 days you'll be able to gain access to this. It has 1,000,000 gold per day, plus a whole bunch of resources and some XP bonuses as well. I kind of wish they made this the weapon XP, since we got so many of the Descendant XPs already before, so mixing this up would be kind of nice, but they have that there. The Kuiper mining, a whole bunch of these, and they also have these new ones where you can get the crystallization catalyst and then a box containing a whole bunch of resources. So all that put together, I think, is a nice touch, and I think that they should always have these up at all times, but luckily they're back now, so we have Descendant daily task logging in, so you can do these every single day, plus a weekly event, which is this big one here with the box and the catalyst. In a very bizarre turn of events, I guess the Gooners win in this one, but they updated the Twisted Worship set in the shop to remove the mud flaps from the back. So the mud flaps that are on here, I guess it was worth the dev time and the work and the admin effects of implementing it and hooking it up and getting it working to remove the mud flaps. So the butt flaps are gone. If you have already bought the Twisted Worship skin, you will have this as two different options. You notice they're both different skin options here in the customization. So if you wanted to, you could use the butt flaps as an option, but if you are really upset by the fact that the butt is blocked by the butt flaps, you can take the no butt flap option and have that there for the Gooners out there. I guess this was very high priority on their list to get done. They also did some improvement updates for AMD frame generation, some overall resolution improvements, ray tracing options, and then some options for PS5 Pro as well for improvement there. So you look through some of these if these are the sort of things that matter to you. They also added two infiltrations, or the outposts here. You'll notice on the left side of the screen it shows how many power units have been disabled. It's just like a little text addition. I guess this is to help bunnies that run in and start zapping everything when people are trying to sneak or hacker it. So it'll show a count on screen. I don't know if what this is actually going to change, to be honest with you, but at least it's there and it's an option, so that's kind of cool. Another huge change, something I've been asking for a very long time, and this isn't even all the things that I would like to see changed about this, but there are some monsters in the game that have highly problematic projectiles that honestly shouldn't exist in a game like this or any game ever because they're just unfun. They've targeted a good number of these, so they should feel a lot better. So Annihilator, Slaughterer, Living Artillery, Devotee, Blazer, and Bug Spreader, they all have really annoying projectiles that either do a ridiculous amount of damage or track you with some superhuman tracking. Like you can dash to the side and they'll do a full 180 turn, like Screech turn on a dime, Tokyo Drift, and come back and hit you, or they hit. I mean, there's a bunch of these, like, for bosses like Swamp Walker and things like that. There's some that are just completely unavoidable, but this makes it better. So, Ledris, the tracking strength has been lowered. Begza, Demigor, Vrignid, Nazastra, Agonia, Goroth is a big one. That's a horrible one. And then Gramoth as well. Now, they've made some changes to these. Projectile has been modified to disappear after a certain period of time, so they actually will time out for some of these. Goroth is one of the worst ones for sure. And the tracking function has been removed for Demigor, which is nice. I think they still also need to make sure that they have a passive audio sound. Some of the effects, like the hockey pucks or the like flying red skulls, they make no sound, and the skulls themselves are very hard to see. So they're silent. The VFX, like the particle system, is very difficult to spot, and they do ridiculous damage. So it's this really horrible experience where you have no feedback, the tracking is ridiculous, and the whole experience is just terrible. But they're making the tracking less, which means it's going to be easier to avoid them, and hopefully with some of this, it'll make it overall better. They still need better feedback, like sound and VFX to play, so you know that they're there, but at least this is an improvement over before. Kind of a minor change, but interesting for new players, is they're going to make it so you resurrect in place in normal difficulty only in dungeons. I think this is a weird change. It's definitely going to be better than no resurrection zone, like where you can't res, you have to wait for someone to come get you, so you'll be able to resurrect from that on normal difficulty. But still on hard, it's going to be back to no resurrection zone, which means that this mechanic is going to be strange for new players coming in. They're going to be like, why all of a sudden I can't resurrect? I think it's better to just keep it uniform so they understand what's going on. But I guess if you're a new player and you're playing on normal difficulty, it's going to be a little bit easier to do infiltration operations just to get the dang quest done so you can continue the campaign. On top of that, they lowered the difficulty of all content on normal in general, so they're just trying to get people on-ramped into the game easier. So the level decline begins with Kingston, the last emergency communicator, which is very early on, like in your first hour, I would say, of gameplay, range from a minimum level 1 to a maximum level 15. So all normal mode just got nerfed to make it easier for people to onboard, along with the no resurrection zone change for the normal operations, so you can actually do that in dungeons as well. The rewards stay the same, but normal mode is now easier for newer players. They will also get normal tier modules from main quest between Kingston and Hagios, the first few zones, so you'll be able to get that done, which helps you build your character easier. And this is all just going along with people just getting set up for the game. They want to make sure that as people try the game, that they're not hitting walls where that makes them want to quit. That's why they nerfed Pyromaniac. That's why they were nerfed Dead Bride. That's why they're doing those changes here, because they care more about getting people into the end game than about the difficulty of the normal mode anyways. And as promised, there are 3 ultimate weapons that have been heavily underperforming compared to the rest of the roster that have been buffed. The first one in line is going to be the final masterpiece, and this one has just been completely reworked. So before, what it did is you would actually, and I haven't really invested in mine at all, what it did is as you reloaded, it would give you different buffs, and if you got the same buff randomly twice in a row or 3 times in a row, it would increase the effect. Things like crit chance or firearm attack, that sort of thing. The problem is it was so random that it became very useless because you often would just change buffs every rotation, which means you would never stack it. The value was low and the base of the weapon was pretty low as well. So they added about 2.5 thousand more firearm attack to the base of the weapon as well, which makes it much stronger overall. And they added a brand new effect that works like this. Every time you reload, it will swap to the next effect in the sequence. So it goes poison, electric, fire, chill, rotates back. If you don't have one active, it'll randomly choose one for the first one, but then it'll rotate through the process all the way through. While you have this on the weapon, even if you hit a no target or not, every bullet you fire has a chance to trigger an elemental AoE explosion when it strikes. And again, this works on the ground as well. So notice that I'm on lightning, I reload. Now I'm on poison, I create poison clouds everywhere. Now I'm on fire, fire explosions, and then it'll go to chill as well. And these will apply the default debuffs that go along with these effects as well. And thanks to my chat for pointing out that as you scale these up, because I've put no investment into this weapon because it's so bad, or was so bad, the trigger rate goes up to 50% and the radius goes up to 5 meters on these. So this should actually be a pretty significant increase for the weapon, and also have some good synergies with some things as well, as if a 5-meter radius on some of these, including the poison puddle, will have some really cool synergies depending on the build that you're working with. The next weapon is the Albion Cavalry Gun, which was kind of a weird weapon before. The DPS was very low. It was useful on characters that could stun, because the way it worked before is if you shot a target that was stunned, it will continue to stun and you'll have increased crit from that. The problem is it only stunned when you crit, and it had a very low crit rate. So they reworked it now to have an addition where you hit a target and it will mark them. So you'll notice that when I shoot a target, a mark appears. It's a very short duration, so you have to keep hitting the same target over and over to keep the mark active. But if you're shooting a target that is marked, you have increased crit rate, which is pretty nice. Additionally, when you're shooting a target that is marked, you have a chance to ricochet. So you'll see how sometimes bullets fly out. They will fly out and deal damage, and sometimes stun the enemy as well. So you'll get a chance to stun targets and spread damage out as well. So it just bounces around, which is a cool effect. It has a nice little bonus to it, plus some extra AoE damage, which is super nice. And the addition of the third part of the effect is the horseshoe effect, which is hilarious. While you're shooting, this functions pretty much like sharp precision shot. While you're holding down the shooting button and hitting targets, you will stack up the horseshoe effect. You'll see the horseshoe effect is on me right now, and it gives you increased movement speed. So I don't know if we're going to see like a Bunny Albion Cavalry Gun meta now, but you'll see that my speed slows down significantly. And as I fire, it speeds up and speeds up and speeds up, and you start moving faster and faster while you're shooting the weapon, which gives you ricochets and stuns and damage and movement speed. So hopefully with this, it should be enough to give it some good value. Realistically, I think the base stats are still a little low for what you'd like to see from a weapon of this kind, but the effects are nice, and maybe with Bunny, it can allow you to shoot and move at the same time while still triggering your AoEs, which is kind of cool. And lastly of the three is changes to the Perforator. I'm a little sad about this one initially, because I did like the shield busting that we had with Perforator. I thought it was a unique effect, and it's super useful against Colossus, because you can actually, it's the only effect in the game that can deal crazy damage to shields. It was a low proc rate, but it was kind of nice to have, but that is now completely gone. The weapon has been completely reworked. And this is basically a one-handed Greg's Reversed Fate now. So how it works is that when you deal damage with a critical hit, or you hit a weak point, it will spawn little explosive grenades that flare out and explode and deal damage. These explosions will apply a debuff for 10 seconds that will increase weak point damage to that target. So now, as you're firing and critting and hitting weak points, little grenades will fly off from the Perforator and deal damage, and these scale as well. So this is basically like a little baby Greg's now. It still does very high good base damage from shooting. So like it still is a good base damage weapon. Still good for Haley if you wanted to do a Zenith build off of it as well. But now it is shooting off little flares that fly off and deal damage to targets that scale pretty decently. And as you put more points into it and get duplicates on it, it gets better and better. Again, I'm a little sad to see the shield busting going, because I think we need that in the game somewhere. But it is kind of cool to see this being reworked a little bit to be kind of like a mixture between a single target and a mobbing weapon. Next is a hugely requested feature. If you drop a Transcendent module, a red module on the ground, and you currently have max modules, you have 1,500 modules in your inventory, you can't take any more, and a red module drops. Now, instead of that being lost forever, because you'd have to zone to Albion to dismantle modules to free up space, now Transcendent modules, if you can't pick them up, they will be treated as lost and go to your lost and found in your mailbox. This is, again, only for Transcendent modules, but at least the red mods that drop when you're full on modules won't be completely lost, which is pretty cool. Additionally, they have caved completely on some of the more annoying farms in the game, the biggest ones being the modules that were combine only, shot focus, hyper focus. Those are like kind of the big ones that were being moved in, but also bolt integration, hardline suppression, and shield collector. These could only be earned by combining modules together, and in some cases took a very long time of pure RNG to get. It took me a full month of combining purple modules to get shot focus, so some of these are very hard to get, but they changed it now so that they can be gotten from combining, but also there are now dedicated locations where you can go to farm these as well if you wanted to do that as well. So those options are there. They did the same thing with what is probably the worst farm in the game right now, which is, or I guess previously before the patch, which is getting all the red modules for Enzo specifically, which have to come from purple vaults. You have to use the code breakers and code analyzers to open purple vaults around the world using Enzo in specific locations in order to get a chance at dropping these, which was a huge farm for a lot of people, and especially if you're going solo in a single party, it was very annoying to try and get these. So now they've added in additional drops for these as well. They've also added in some hard infiltration operation rewards for some other modules that were a little harder to get just because they didn't have a spot to drop. So like noise surge, increased efficiency, like incendiary bomb, things like that, being able to drop now from these locations, which is great. And they also made it so that some modules that were only attainable through hard difficulty operations can now be acquired as a 400% operation completion reward. A bunch of UI UX changes have gone in. They made it so that the waiting time has been shortened in the special operations if people choose different options. You're not sitting there waiting. I think that's great because once everyone chooses what they want, just let it continue to go to the next part. If people want to dodge out, they can. If people want to continue, they can. Stop holding them in purgatory. You can also matchmake by clicking the infiltration operation icon on the map when you're in Albion. So you can just go to the map, go to a location, find the infiltration operation, click on it, and queue. You actually don't need to go to the terminal in Albion or go to the location. You can do it straight from the map, which is huge. That's awesome. They also updated the access info screen for weapons. You can go into the weapons here. You can see on the ultimate weapons what pieces you have and what pieces you need. You also still have the account, like the amount that you have for that weapon, and of course the amount that you've upgraded as well. So it shows all of that together, which is really nice. And then you also have these, and you can click on these to see the research as well directly from the weapon. So it makes it a lot easier to keep track of which ones you've maxed out, which ones you haven't maxed out, what level they're at, and what materials you need based on the requirements there. And of course you can click on this and say, okay, I need this to make this to max out, that sort of thing. And apparently they've also added in the materials on consumables in your inventory when you hover over them. I don't know if I'm being gaslit or not. People in chat are saying this wasn't here before, but I guess now when you go to core materials and enhancement materials, you can see what they require to craft. I guess it wasn't, because otherwise I would be going to this screen to check this more often, and I never do. So maybe this wasn't here before, and now you can check materials on this inside of your consumable screen in game, which is a nice UI improvement. They added in a visual for the mastery bonuses to show how many preset slots you get per mastery, which makes it all the more obvious how little we actually get. Considering at mastery 30, you get 12 presets total, which they are 250 caliber to add each. They're very expensive, and this doesn't even cover all the descendants we have in game. Like, you can't even have one for every descendant without buying more using the premium currency. So I think they should up this to like 20 or something, give us a lot more slots, but I guess they got to make money somehow, huh? They also added an end of sale icon to the skins that can no longer be earned or purchased in game to help make this a little less confusing for a lot of people. They've also changed it so the Guardian Lance effect, the Kingsguard Lance, is only shown, like the icon in world space that shows that you can shoot your Lance target, the deployable from the Kingsguard Lance. That will only show if it's your deployable. This makes it a lot easier. This was a big thing for Kingsguard Lance when it came out. It would show all of them, even if they weren't yours. So it was hard to know, like if you're in a party of multiple people with Kingsguard Lance, it was hard to know whose was whose and what you were shooting at. So for this, they changed it so it will only show it if it's yours, and you can increase the duration of that deployable. If it's not, it won't show up at all, which is pretty nice. So along with strange skin changes and the new expensive Reactor Implant system, which makes reactors a lot better, I think the game has been going in a great direction. But let me know what you think about the update today down below. If you found value in today's video, leave a like down below, leave a comment for the algorithm to help this video get seen by more people, and don't forget to check out my other channels for other content and other stuff and other things.